So, hello everyone. Welcome to you all. Thank you for joining this morning. Can everyone on Zoom hear me okay? I can see you here down on the screen. Give me a thumbs up. Very good. Lovely to see you all. So, I was delighted, both honored and humbled really to be asked to lead today's Ghatika monthly with a great sense of trepidation, given the beings who are represented behind me and the names who have done this prior to me, including John, of course, and all the others. And so there was a great sense of, oh no, now me. And I feel very small and very sort of embarrassed almost to be here leading this session. I certainly have nothing unique to offer from my side. Maybe a different accent, maybe. But apart from that, nothing particularly unique. But the Dharma that we're exploring today, this transforming the mind, Lojong, is transformative on its own, and I really think anybody could be leading this kind of talk, and it would be of benefit. It's so practical to our everyday moment, everyday lives. And so my sense is that I think I'd like to begin with the meditation. I'd like to begin with that Ghatika, the 24 minutes, just to give it really the time it needs so that I don't waffle on too much and then whittle away the time for the meditation. Really, that's my reasoning. So we'll start with that. And I was thinking about what sort of meditation to do, and I've really been feeling a calling since arriving here for stillness, for calm, for serenity, and the land has certainly given that to me. And so shamata really seemed to call out to me, of course. And then the many different modes of shamatha, what to do. And I just keep coming back to this home base of mindfulness of breathing. I find it so nourishing, so soothing, and it's right there, wherever we are. And so that's what I'd like to do. And I think we can bring emphasis to those three qualities that many of us are familiar with, that Lama Alan has shared with us. So relaxation, first of all, that deep sense of ease, both in the body, but also in the mind, ensuring that we're really cultivating such a deep sense of ease, such a deep sense of relaxation that although thoughts and sounds and other distractions may appear, we're not moved from our seat. We're not moved from the stillness. We're so profoundly at ease that it's not interesting enough for us. And so that deep sense of ease, both in the body and in the mind. So I encourage you to get comfortable, whatever's going to be most comfortable for you, whether it's making use of the floor or whatever facilities you have at home. And then, of course, that quality of stability. Stability, which in the physical body manifests as stillness, the ability to be still, to be grounded, to be comfortable. And in the meditation, in the mind, it manifests as that sort of continuity of our attention, right? That stability over time. And so we'll emphasize that. And then we'll turn to that third quality, the clarity, the vividness. And this is about the sharpness of our attention, how clear the object appears to us, but also the subjective side, how clear our mind is, sharp our mind is. And so that will be the focus for this practice. So let me set up my timer. Please find a comfortable posture and we can go straight into practice. And so we can begin our practice in a way that is familiar, I'm sure, to most, if not all of us. Settling our body in its natural state by first of all bringing the awareness, dropping the awareness down into the body. First of all, right down to the ground, our contact with the earth. Just attending to those raw tactile sensations, the solidity, the firmness. not adding anything to them, not taking anything away. In the sense, let there be only the sense. And moving that awareness up through the body, becoming aware of the whole array of tactile sensations. From the very subtle tingling vibrations up to the coarser movements of the breath. Taking it all in at once. And setting the body at ease. At this point, if you notice that your posture is not quite comfortable, you can already detect some niggling. You might like to adjust. Otherwise, really setting the body at ease, allowing the shoulders to drop away from the ears. Relaxing all the muscles through the head and the neck. Releasing tension through the shoulders, down the arms and the hands. And any tightening through the back and the chest and the belly. Just soothing and softening, particularly with that out breath. It can be quite nice, quite soothing, to temporarily take control of the breath. Take a series of slow, deep breaths. Quite like to breathe in through the nose, breathing into the belly, into the chest. And then a soft, slow exhale through the mouth. You can do 3 of these. So here we've emphasized already this quality of relaxation. And we continue to do so from now until the end of the practice, and even beyond. Breath by breath, more at ease, more relaxed. The quality of stability we can already manifest in our practice through stillness now, letting our body remain unmoving, avoiding any fidgeting, any unnecessary movement, itching, giving your body the gift of being still. And that clarity, that sharpness of attention, that third quality can manifest physically as well as a vigilance, as being alert in your posture. There's not a time to become dozy and sleepy, but we remain quite alert. As we now ride the wave of the out-breath, allowing the body to fully release the out-breath all the way to the end, I invite you to not only relax a little bit further in the body, but also to release all other activity, thinking, planning, remembering, any preferences, any ideas, any judgments. With each out-breath, release all activity and come to a deeper part of your present experience. When you take off the layers of the thinking, the planning, remembering the sounds, the sensations, when you take those layers off, what remains? Of course, we may know the answer. I don't want you to name it. I want you to go there experientially. As you release your awareness into the present moment, you rest in the stillness of your awareness. Is it not the case that without your having to do anything, changing movements, the sensations of the in-breath and the out-breath continue to happen and rise up to meet you? They rise up in this expansive awareness. So this now is our object of focus, primarily allowing your awareness to rest, holding its own ground. Without critical judgments, without labeling, preference, without grasping or identification. And then simply note and be aware of the movements of the breath throughout the body, moment to moment. Of course, unless we are very well trained, our mind will wander. This is to be expected. This is not a failure of the practice. The key here in the practice is not to have a blank, empty mind, but it is to notice when we've become distracted, when our mind has been set in motion. And when we notice we become distracted, rather than perhaps becoming frustrated and punishing ourselves, it's a moment, not for a very elaborated celebration, but we noticed, we were aware. So the moment we're aware, we notice. And the key is to relax, release that distraction, perhaps with the out-breath, and return back to the simplicity of awareness, illuminating the movements of the respiration. Now, moment to moment, while you're aware of the breath, can you also know that you're aware of the breath? You make that explicit. Because if you're aware of being aware of the breath, that will help you notice when you're not aware of the breath. And another helpful tool that we can bring into the practice to help us with the continuity, with the stability of attention over time, is of course the counting. So if you found this helpful, then you can bring this into the practice. One succinct mental count at the end of every in-breath, like a punctuation mark. We can count something like 1 to 7, 1 to 7. no matter how distracted we may become, we can always come back. Sharon Salzberg once put it, there is no distance you can travel so much in your mind, no time that is too long that can pass, that you cannot in a moment just begin again, renew mindfulness, come back. If you do become quite lost, we don't need to give in, give up. Can begin again. This moment, this next breath. The job is always the same, just this next one breath. It's not the next 10 minutes of breaths. It's this breath, now. So, in terms of the talk and our topic of mind training for modern life, what I wanted to begin with was this quote that was put in the description of the talk from the third Dodrubchen Rinpoche, Jigme Tempe Nyima. And this, of course, one of the sons of Dujum Lingpa, and whose writings on Dzogchen is the Dalai Lama's favorites in terms of Dzogchen and what he relies upon. So this is just to say that these are not just flippant comments made by anybody, but this is, reliable comments here. And so this comes in his text on transforming felicity and adversity into the spiritual path, just a little bit after he's spoken about this, transforming adversity. And so he says, by training in this way, you will become gentle-minded, easygoing, and courageous. There will be no obstacles to your spiritual practice. All unfavorable circumstances will arise as splendid and auspicious, and your mind will continually be content with the joy of serenity. So come on, David, I'm ready. I'm ready to be gentle-minded. I'm ready to be easygoing. I'm ready to abide in the joy of serenity. And he finishes this, he says, to follow a spiritual path in a degenerate era, such armor as this is indispensable. And I like this idea of armor. We can see Lojong as armoring ourselves to be able to face anything, but not armoring ourselves, going to the armory and grabbing a ton of weapons, not in a very defensive, aggressive way. We've tried that, right? We've tried to be very aggressive towards difficult people and difficult situations. We've tried to fight them and get rid of them. And so this is a slightly different approach, really. This is armoring ourselves with, I would like to think of it as like a backpack of tools, practices, ways of thinking, these aphorisms, these phrases that Lojong is so famous for, so that you have something ready to go, so that when life brings something that's going to, challenge you, maybe it brings aversion or attachment, it, triggers some mental affliction within you, then you have something ready to go. You have something that you can pull out of the backpack that will allow you to transform this. And so one way I like to think of this is it's like a chess game. I don't know if anybody here plays chess, is any good at chess. I am not. But a game like that, chess or something similar. And let's say you're playing a game and you are, 2-3 steps ahead of your opponent. You already know how you're going to win. And so if you were to imagine you're in that situation, you'd have a quiet confidence about you. You'd have a sense of comfort about you, because you know that whatever is going to be thrown up next, you've got this. You've already got this. You know how you're going to win. And so with Lojong, when you have these practices and these phrases and these aphorisms and you're familiar with them, you do have a quiet confidence that whatever life's going to throw at me here, I'll be okay. I've got this. I've got something in the backpack that I'm going to be able to pull out here and make use of. And so it's described as a kind of alchemy, this sort of transmuting the situations we find ourselves in and finding something useful. And so the question here is, how do I take this adversity and still respond? Lojong is, patience and acceptance and compassion. These are not weak minds, and it's not about not responding, becoming a doormat, becoming passive. You still respond, but you respond how you would like to respond, rather than the mental afflictions choosing how you're going to respond, right? Our usual mental habits, which is usually what happens for us, right? Somebody challenges us, somebody says something upsetting, aversion starts exaggerating, and aversion almost pushes you out of the way and says, we're going to say this, we're going to do this, we're going to get back at them. And so your mental affliction is running the show, and it's deciding how you're going to respond. And so Lojong is about, well, actually, how would I like to respond to the situation to bring the most benefit, the most meaning to myself and to others. And so this is, as we'll see today, it's up to us. It's up to us. We are the ones who designate our reality. We can look at something and see it as, this is a huge obstacle, this is a big problem, this is a great tragedy in my life. Or we could also, if we wanted to, choose to look at it as a welcome challenge or an opportunity or an adventure. That is up to us. We don't have to, of course not, we don't have to, but we can do that. And this is about our, our well-being and also our ability to benefit others. It's about finding greater peace, patience in life, as he said, being more gentle-minded, easygoing, these sorts of things. And so it doesn't mean we don't act, and that's a really important thing. We act in the way that we would like to. And it's a complete and utter transformation of your life. Complete transformation of your life, but not through transforming the outer world. which is what we normally try to do. And that is not always possible, right? Price rises, your body is sick, you lost your job, whatever it is. There are so many things that life throws at us that we just cannot do anything about. And so this is a transformation of our life, not by transforming the outer world, but by transforming our inner world, transforming our mind. And as Shantideva tells us, when you transform your mind in this way, it is as if all outer problems have been solved anyway, because you're no longer seeing them as problems. You're seeing them as something that could perhaps benefit you and others. And so this is, these Lojong practices is what was so brilliant and so wonderful for me. When I think of the perspective I was coming from before Buddhism, before meditation, of depression and anxiety and panic attacks and fighting the world and it's not fair, why is this happening to me? I'm blaming everybody, and I was very much a victim, right? I was blaming everything that was going on. And then to learn that I could have some control over my thinking, which in turn controls my perception, which controls then my reality, my experience of my reality as a whole, and my feelings, my way of experiencing my reality. To know that that was something that I could do, that could be within my grasp, was just so empowering. Because the thought that it's all about the outer world and what the outer world is giving to you is a very disempowering thing. I think to come to terms with the fact that you don't control the outer world is actually a very depressing thing, if you don't know that there is something that you can control, that being your inner world. And so in those situations where I just could not control what the world was dishing up for me, to know that I could control my response, and in the end that made all the difference, that was huge and continues to be huge, right? And so this is based on the Buddha telling us, in the different turnings of the wheel of turning the wheels of Dharma, that our reality does not exist in the way that we think it does, right? And this is both a very profound teaching, but also I think on the very mundane level, we can all see this. That we think, this person is arrogant, that meal is bad, this movie is boring, and we almost think those qualities are out there. In that process of designation, in that process of labeling that person as arrogant, that meal as whatever, we almost forget and we believe that those qualities are out there. But of course, as the Buddha tells us, and as we start to see and explore both in meditation and in the contemplations, those qualities are not out there. We designate them based on some appearance, of course, based on some appearance, if it's another person, based on some behavior, but that behavior can be tiny. Sometimes somebody might just pull a funny face at you, and it might be very small. It might just be just that. And we see that and we go, oh, that person doesn't like me. Well, of course they wouldn't, because they're not a very nice person anyway. And because of and then we start to find all sorts of evidence for why we think that person is horrible in the first place. And now we see that person as 100% arrogant, rude, nasty. Well, nobody likes them anyway. Ask anybody. Nobody likes them anyway. And so we start to see it this way, right? And the Buddha is saying you could also choose to look at this person with understanding, with compassion in any other number of ways. You don't have to. Absolutely not. You don't have to. It's your prerogative. All of this, Lojong, is your prerogative. But it is an option. It is an option. And the option is to live with a sense of, whenever you come into contact with that person or think of that person, where your heart contorts and your mind twists and you think very badly of that person and you're becoming upset, or to live with greater ease, gentle-mindedness, and so on. It is a choice that we can make. And so what I've noticed, in my small experience so far, remembering how I used to fight the world, as I said, just blaming everybody, blaming everything. It's not fair. Why is this happening? And how I live now. And I'm not perfect, right? But I'm trying day by day. I live with much greater ease. I'm happier. I'm kinder to people. I'm a nicer person to be around, and I'm able to be of more benefit to others. And so I'm happier, and I'm able to be more present and be of more benefit to others. And so it is not my outer world that has changed. The world is still just as dark and scary and horrible, if not more. There's more fear and hate today than ever. And so that hasn't changed, but my inner world has and continues to. And so that's what we're exploring here. And what this sort of Lojong, this mind training, is not always easy. A comment that Lama Allen has made many times. Gyatso Rinpoche makes this comment at the beginning of this text that I mentioned, Transforming Adversity and Felicity into the Spiritual Path. He makes the comment that this is not a beginner's text. that this stream of teachings, this Lojong mind training or mind exercises, stemming from a teacher in the 11th century, that were originally sort of oral teachings, originally secret teachings, not passed, not publicly given. And Lama Alan has, given different theories about this, and one that he mentions, of course, is this sense that maybe a teacher thought not everybody would be able to get it, not everybody would be able to do it, not everybody would have the sufficient grounding in really understanding the causes of their suffering, the Four Noble Truths, karma, klesha, and so on. But maybe not everybody would also have the courage and the openness to be able to do this, to be able to look at their challenges and say, I'm going to make something out of this, rather than simply falling apart. And so for me, and I'm certainly not disagreeing with that at all, who would I be to refute anyway? But I do think that there are aspects of these Lojong teachings, particularly around transforming adversity and felicity, of course, it's both equally. My last week or so here in my cabin, warm, well-fed, comfortable, rabbits and chipmunks outside, and deer and coyotes who are so friend-shaped, even though they don't present as friends. And I'm well, I'm healthy, I'm happy, really couldn't ask for anything more. And it's in moments like that that we could think, what, samsara is not so bad after all. Here in the peak of samsara, everything's actually quite okay. Maybe I don't need much meditation right now. I don't need much practice. It would be easy to think that, right? And so when things are going well, that can easily be an obstacle to our practice. We think, oh, you know what, everything's fine. Samsara is not so bad. I don't know what they're talking about, all these different types of suffering. But then equally, when things are really terrible, we have the same situation. How am I supposed to practice when my life is like this? And so then those are kind of the two moments where our practice can become most alive. And so I think there are certain aspects of these Lojong teachings around transforming adversity and felicity into the spiritual path that can be of huge benefit to anyone. They are indispensable for a Buddhist practitioner following the path until you are viewing all reality from the perspective of Rigpa and you see both adversity and felicity and you have no preference. Until then, until enlightenment, we need Lojong practice. We need Lojong practice. And so it's essential for us as practitioners following this spiritual path, other spiritual paths. But I think this can be beneficial for anyone, regardless of belief, spiritual practice. And when I say spiritual path, when we talk about transforming adversity onto the spiritual path, that term of spiritual path might not resonate with everyone. So we may have a sense of a very specific spiritual path. But for some, they may not feel like they're following anything. But do you want to be happier? Do you want to be less stressed? Do you want to be more relaxed, live with greater ease, be kinder, be more compassionate? You could swap spiritual path with that, because that is a sense of spiritual path. That is you moving towards being a more compassionate, happy, loving person. That is a spiritual path. And so how do we stop the difficulties that we experience from throwing us off that? Because often we have this sense, right? I'd love to be a kind person. I'd love to be really caring and compassionate and always patient and understanding, but I have to work with so-and-so, and I have to deal with this, and I have to deal with that. And so we have this sense, I'd love to, but my life doesn't allow. And so how can we let life allow, actually? How can it propel us in that direction? So sometimes I think with Lojong, Lojong is about, our entire life becoming our practice. And sometimes I think there can be another duality where we don't need any more. With this sense of you wake up in the morning, you do your 10, 20 minutes, 40 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hour, whatever it is of practice. And you're there very zen, breathing in calm, breathing out peace, and you're feeling very relaxed. And maybe you're bringing in the four immeasurables. May all beings be happy and free of suffering. May all beings never be parted from freedom's true joy. You're expressing all this love for beings, and then you get off the cushion, and then you're in work, and you say, but not you, and not you because you cut me up in traffic, and then we're raging and fighting our way through our day. And it's kind of like, where was that lovely you gone? That was there this morning, who wished love for all sentient beings. Where have they gone? And there's yet another duality in our life of lovely, Dharma me, practitioner me, all serene and zen. Look at me, and in my meditation practice. And then there's the real us that our family and friends and colleagues get, right? And they're very different. And so Lojong is about actually integrating. Everything is your practice. What happens when when we do sort of get caught up in all that, the mental afflictions have taken over. Our practice has not integrated. Our practice is not integrated. And so this is about, when you go to spend time with your family over Christmas and your great aunt makes those comments that she really shouldn't make in public, and that challenges you and starts to get you a little bit riled up and upset. This is your opportunity to have that compassion you were talking about. That compassion. I'd love to be a kind, compassionate, understanding person. Your great aunt is arising as a blessing, as an opportunity for you right now to do that. How are we ever going to cultivate those levels of compassion and kindness and patience and so on if life does not arise and challenge us and we don't need to respond in that way? I often think that the people with the most compassion, the most patience, the most understanding that I've ever met are those who have been challenged and been through hell to have reached that level. And so, if we think of some examples, then think of some examples of transforming adversity. Well, my journey down here, up here, along here, whatever, began with a train journey to London first. And for various reasons, my train being cancelled and whatever else, I ended up being bumped to first class. And I'd never been in first class before. So I was practically royalty at this point. And I was, I got on the train and I went past the ordinary carriage, I don't know, with the ordinary folk. And, it was very busy and all these plasticky seats. And then I got into the first class carriage and there was only one other person there. And the seats were very comfortable. They reclined back, place for charging, free tea and coffee and snacks. I didn't realize until halfway through, but wonderful, right? I was starting to settle in and think this is going to be quite a nice journey. This could be quite pleasant. And then just before we set off, two guys get on the train with nothing but packs of beer, and they already smell like alcohol. And it's 10 a.m. on a Sunday, and they sit right across the way. And I can see my mind start up, right, with the judgments. Is this really a first-class activity? This doesn't seem like a first-class activity. I can see my mind starting with judgments, right? With these ideas of, I'm not sure. I hope they're not going to be loud and disruptive, because my train journey, my peace of mind, my quiet, this was going to be quite, and I can see the mind start to turn. And so here's an opportunity, right? Here's the mind looking at something. This is an obstacle. This is adversity. This is something. It starts with the very simple, I'm not sure I like this. I don't want this. And then the exaggerations and elaborations come from there. And so I could see this arising from the mind, and here's an opportunity to practice that Lojong thing that I've been talking about. And so I look upon their faces, and I don't know who they are, I don't know what they're doing, I don't know where they're going, but I can see joy on their faces, that they're sharing a wonderful moment together. And so I think, in this world, there is so much darkness and so much misery and sadness sometimes that any experience of joy, providing it's not harming someone, is a beautiful thing, even if it's not the joy that I would have chosen. And I can see the joy on their face. I can see the connection on their faces. And so rejoicing, right? Delighting in the joy that they are experiencing. And there, that any aversion, any self-cherishing, any sense of my journey, my whatever is vanished, right? And instead there is that cherishing the other and seeing and appreciating their joy. And so when we do this, we're not suppressing something. And that's the great thing about Lojong. I wasn't sat there going, no, I'm not upset, I won't be upset, and then pretending something. It is, some of you may have heard Garchen Rinpoche talk about, it's like there's one chair in the mind. And he says, for example, if compassion is in that chair in the mind, anger can't be in the chair. And if anger's in it, compassion can't be in the chair. It's only space for one. And so it's not that anger is not present when compassion is, it's not that anger is being suppressed, not like you've got chloroform on it, you're holding it down when you're feeling compassionate. It's just that it's not there at all. It's swapped over. And so this is based on, as the Dalai Lama says, the law of oppositions. That's what Lojong is based upon, this aspect of transforming adversity, is the law of oppositions and knowing. And when I talked about that backpack, it's having and knowing right there what is going to be the appropriate sort of opposing mind for whatever affliction or aversion or whatever is coming up. And I remember distinctly, I used to work in mental health hospitals, and I remember times of people hurling verbal abuse and sometimes physical abuse. And I remember distinctly, and I didn't really have an explanation for it until later, but I remember distinctly being acutely aware of their suffering and not being angry with them. not having the sense of who you're talking to, you can't say that to me, and fighting back, when they're hurling some abuse. Still acting, still making sure they're safe, everybody's safe, I'm safe. But this sense of, I know where their suffering was coming from. I'm acutely aware of their mental ill health, and that's where the words are coming from. And so then it's compassion. And it wasn't that I was suppressing anger or trying not to be angry. There was something else in the chair. So this is what we're talking about here. This sort of radical shift in our attitude. It's a strong mind. And what is really important, really, really key with Lojong is that it has to be grounded in wisdom and compassion. The wisdom that understands the sources of our suffering, particularly those inner causes of our suffering, and compassion for ourselves and others, everybody involved in the situation. If it is grounded in this sense of, no, I'm a Buddhist, I don't let these things annoy me like this anymore. I'm a meditator, I don't get annoyed by this anymore. If it's grounded in, that's a very shaky and unhealthy foundation. And then, yes, you're just going to suppress emotions and pretend. Fake it till you make it. And it's not that helpful. It's not that, you're just going to be denying your own feelings. So it needs to be grounded in this sense of understanding where the suffering comes from. And it's a strong mind that is willing to face challenges head on. That's taking responsibility not only for what you say and do, the words that come out of your mouth and what you do physically, but also for your mind, for your emotional responses, for your thinking, for your perception. And this is perhaps why it was not always easy, and well, it was said to be not always easy, and perhaps a secret teaching, because it's not easy to be able to see and know and face up to our own afflictions and be real with them. But it is immensely empowering. If we can recognize that the degree to which I suffer in any given situation depends upon what is going on in my mind. And I may not have full control right now, but I can do the work, and I can start to have control over my mind. And I can stop blaming the weather, the cold food, the late text for the fact that I'm unhappy, and start to take responsibility for my own mind. And slowly build up. We start small. If we're lucky, we start small with the spilt milk, with the smaller things. If we're, you could say, unfortunate or fortunate to have major upheavals, then those will be the things that we transform. And I think if we're fortunate, we'll have the smaller challenges. And so there's a couple of quotes from Jigme Tempe Nyima that I just wanted to read out and just perhaps comment on that I thought were quite helpful from this text. And so the first thing he says is, by not recognizing that this being the suffering that we experience is due to our own mental habits, we blame this on external circumstances, and eventually the flames of hatred, suffering, and so on spread endlessly. And so this is the wisdom that we were talking about, right? Recognizing that all mental states are created, as he says here, by our own mental habits. And so whenever there's an uncomfortable feeling, whenever there's an unpleasant feeling, almost immediately we are, who did this, right? Where did this come from? We are just, any sort of sense of pain, discomfort, there needs to be a target, somebody I can blame for this. I wouldn't have caused my own suffering. Somebody must have done this. And as that old saying goes, right? Whenever we're pointing outside, there's always a few fingers pointing back, just to relay the point that this is an interconnected experience. But we believe it to be the manager's fault. It's the ex's fault. It's this fault. It's that fault. It's something I need to blame, a target that I need to get rid of. I need to sort. Even small things. I remember a time ago, going to get the milk out of the fridge for a cup of tea, and very British. And I was expecting both the lid to be on, because that's what you would expect, and for it to have more weight than it did. It was actually very light, and the lid was not on properly. And so I, basically threw it out of the fridge all over myself. And almost immediately, it's almost in slow motion as the milk is coming down. There's this sense of there's almost immediately, who did this? Somebody must have done it. It was me. I'm the one who did it. So there's no one else to blame. But almost immediately, there's this sense somebody has done this. Somebody has caused my suffering, and I need a target, right? Somebody to punish. And so our first recognition, it must be that the upset, the anger, the worry, and so on that we experience is actually due to our own mental habits. And this is not always easy to see. External things are triggers. Yes, they are involved. The milk was involved, but as a trigger only. And the way I like to think of this is the spark, the fuel, and the flame, right? For there to be the flame of anger, yes, you need a spark, but you also need the fuel and oxygen. And so we could say that the external thing, the milk, the traffic, the manager, the X, the late text, whatever it is the spark. But then your mind is the fuel and the oxygen. And our strategy right now to make ourselves well and to finally be at peace in life is to fix all of the triggers, to fix all of the sparks. If I can just change my job, change this, get rid of that, then I can be, finally, I can be at peace. And the Buddha is saying there's another avenue available to you here, and that is the fuel, the oxygen, and that is the part that actually you can control. You can't always control the external triggers, as we've said. And what happens to, we've all seen a lighter that has no fuel left in it. What happens then? The spark, it clicks, 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 but there's no flame of anger. And so we can either work on getting rid of the sparks, and we can, if there's something you can do, right, about a difficult circumstance outside, if there's something we can do to improve a situation, great, let's do it. But what about when you can't? We just fall apart, nothing left? Well, there's still the fuel and the oxygen, your mind and your thoughts, and that's something we can work on. And so this is, of course, really quite empowering. We think it's a sort of like victim blaming sometimes, but it's an empowering position to say that, you may not be able to control this happen to you, but you can decide to work on a response. And then he says we have two jobs. We must dispense with the attitude of utter aversion to adversity, and we must develop the attitude of well-being in the face of adversity. So we're swapping a different attitude. So when we have adversity, we're swapping an attitude of aversion for an attitude of well-being. So this attitude of aversion, what does he mean by that? Well, whenever adversity comes our way, we regard it as being 100% the worst thing that has ever happened to me in my life. The worst thing that's ever happened to anyone in anybody's life is happening to me right now. Right? We see it as this huge, horrible obstacle. It's the worst thing. I just don't know. We have this huge sense of just, what am I going to do, right? But of course, as we said, we have the power to define it. The problem doesn't come to you saying, I'm a problem and I'm a very big one, you're not going to like me. We look at it and we say, oh, wow, that's a big problem. Right? And I don't like that. And so we could actually see it in a different way, as we've said. And I think, for example, my experience of depression, my experience of suicidal ideation and anxiety and panic attacks and all that wonderful, lovely stuff, that's what drove me to meditation and what drove me to Buddhism and what drove me to hopefully, being able to help through teaching sometimes. And so at the time, 100% unfavorable, worst thing, horrible. But now I could look back and say, actually, it's a good thing that it happened. I learned a lot about myself, and it's equipped me to be able to help others who go through the same thing because I have that experience. I know what that is like. And so I can look at it now and see that the trajectory of my life, that it was a blessing. And so here's what he's saying, dispensing with the attitude of utter aversion. We're not open to the fact that there could be some good that comes out of this adversity that's coming our way. We've already shut it down. It's easy for us. If we put it in a box, bad thing, then we know how to deal with it. And this is a good thing. And so I'll move towards the good thing and I'll move away from the bad thing. We're very quick to label these things. There's a wonderful story that Ajahn Brahm tells that I quite like. I quite like a lot of his stories. And there's a story he tells that illustrates this quite nicely. And so the story goes that a long time ago, there was a king and he was out hunting. And while out hunting, he cut his finger. And so he called the doctor who always accompanies him on the hunt just to look after it. And so he cleans it up and puts a bandage over it. And the king asks the doctor, is this going to be all right? And the doctor says, good, bad, who knows? And they carry on. And a few days later, they return to the palace and the wound had become infected. And so he calls the doctor again. The doctor cleans it, applies some ointment, puts some bandage on. And the king, now becoming worried, says, are you sure this is going to be all right? And the doctor again says, good, bad, who knows? And now the king's worry was confirmed, and in a few days, the wound had become so badly infected, they had to amputate it. And so he was furious with the doctor. So furious that he personally escorts him down to the dungeon and throws him in a cell. And he says, so how do you like it, doctor, being locked in jail? And he says, being in jail, sire, good, bad, who knows? Then a few weeks later, the wound is fully healed and the king is out hunting again. And he's chasing after an animal. He becomes separated from the others and he gets lost in the forest. And he wanders for a few days. And then he comes across the indigenous forest people who capture him. and they just found a sacrifice. It was their holy day, and they'd found a sacrifice for their forest god. And so they tie the king to this large tree, and the priest is dancing and chanting, and the forest people are sharpening this sacrificial knife. And the priest takes the blade and is about to cut the king's throat when he looks down and he says, "Stop. This man has only 9 fingers. He's not perfect enough to sacrifice to our God. We must set him free." So they set him free. And he wanders and again for a few days, finds his way back to the palace. And immediately upon his return, he makes his way down to the dungeon to say thank you to this wise doctor. And so he says, "Thank you, wise doctor. I thought you were stupid saying all this good, bad, who knows nonsense, but now I realize you were right. It was a good thing I lost my finger. It saved my life. But it was bad of me to lock you in jail. I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry." And the doctor says, "What do you mean, sire? Had you not locked me in jail, I'd have been with you on the hunt. I'd have been captured too, and I have all my fingers." So it's a silly story. But I quite like it. It illustrates this point that we're very quick to say this is a good thing or this is a bad thing. And the truth is, we just don't know. Is it not the case that sometimes you've had something major happen in your life that seems like the end of the world, but turns out to be a good thing? And is it not the case that we don't like to look at it this way? But every breakup, every knockback, every adversity that we've experienced has led us to the life that we have now. Would we have met the people who surround us right now? Would we have encountered what we've encountered? So we can look at each moment, and each moment also has, of course, built us into the person we are today. With the levels of compassion and patience and kindness, and what we offer to the world today is a build-up of all of our different experiences. And so this sort of dispensing of this utter aversion to adversity. The way I see it is being open to the fact that this is maybe 99% horrible, but there may be a 1%. There may be something, and I can be open and willing to look at that. And then this attitude of well-being that we cultivate then it doesn't mean, "Yay, I lost my job. Yay, I'm so glad this has happened to me. I can't wait to see what comes out of this now." That's a bit of a weird mind, right? It's not that. But it's an attitude of well-being, so strength, fortitude, an attitude that says, this may not have been my preferred outcome, but I have my well-being, I have my practice. I don't know where this is going to go. Because the truth is, we have a 100% success rate of getting through every challenge we've ever experienced. We don't think of it that way. Each time we experience adversity, we think, how am I ever going to get through this? But the truth is, we are here as a survivor, right, of every instance of adversity we've ever experienced. And so logic tells us, chances are, I will get through this adversity as well. Oh, we have time. Right, okay. Then he says, a couple of comments here. He says, whenever you're afflicted by sentient beings or anything else, if you habituate your mind to dwelling on suffering only, even the most insignificant circumstance will bring forth great distress. This is because whatever attitude you cultivate towards adversity will, by nature, grow stronger. Thus, as the power of gradual habituation increases, eventually everything that appears will lead to misery, and there'll be no possibility of happiness. And so this he's talking about, obviously, the power of habit, right? Creating and building a habit. And so the first time in this lifetime, with our karmic propensities that we bring with us, we get annoyed by something, right? We learn a behavior from those around us. We become annoyed by something. We create the sort of beginnings of a new habit. We form a new habit. The next time something happens, we respond again, and the next time, and the next time, and we build up a habit. And soon, as he says here, everything that appears leads to great misery. And I'm sure we've all known people, if not maybe we have been the person, who literally sees everything as the worst thing ever and get annoyed by everything. Or have you ever had the day when you're feeling quite annoyed and suddenly everybody and everything is just terribly annoying? One of those days when you're just really feeling irritated and everything arises as a challenge. Even the way people just exist can just be annoying sometimes. And so that shows it's just the power of habituation of your mind, right? Your mind has started to get exaggerated. And so as as one of the sayings goes, even a prick from a thorn can become too hard to bear. As you habituate your mind, as you fixate and you obsess, then even a small cut on your finger becomes, the worst thing that you can experience. Man flu. Is man flu a thing here in the US as well? No? Oh, okay. Man flu is basically when a man has a cold. It's the worst thing. It's much worse than when a woman has a cold. Um, and so we call it man flu. It's just something a woman has never experienced before, I promise you. And so that's a wonderful example of just how we fixate and obsess, and nobody's ever experienced anything like this. And so there we are, we're trying to have some quiet time, trying to meditate, trying to whatever. And I remember one time meditating with an open window, and there were kids outside playing. And these kids were particularly excited, and sometimes kids, when they're excited, they start to scream. And each scream was piercing through my meditation. And I could see myself starting to get more and more irritated. And it was a giggle that sort of floated in through the window, that cut through the delusion for a moment. And I realized that somewhere between the joy out there and the misery in here, it was being turned into something. And so this is the power of the mind, which we fixate on me and my and whatever. And then eventually we can't handle even the slightest bit of adversity. Even the slightest bit of adversity is the worst thing for us. But then he says, if you do not react with anxiety, due to the strength of your mind, it will be easy to experience and handle even great adversity, as if it were as light and flimsy as cotton wool. And so then it works the other way, right? If we're able to bear this small hardship, the spilt milk, the fact that the cat vomited on the floor for the 4th time today, these small things, right? And we build our way up, then eventually we are able to build a new habit, find resilience, and able to deal with things in a much better way. And something that's really important that's just come to mind now is that it's not just for the external adversity as well. And this is really important. Let's say you have some real hardship, something that you're really struggling with, something that hurts, that upsets you, that you're grieving over. And you've tried with the situation to be accepting, to be compassionate, to be kind, whatever it is, and you're still feeling hurt and in pain. And you think, well, what can I do now? I've tried to transform the situation and I just can't. So now what? Well, acceptance is not just for external circumstances, but also for ourselves and our own mind, right? That acceptance of, you know what, yeah, I'm finding this difficult. I am finding this a difficult situation. I'm hurt by this. And so now what? There's nothing you can do. You can't transform this. Well, how do we transform this? We transform this by getting curious and open about our experience, about our feelings in the situation, about the nature of our afflictions. What is this experience and what is this response teaching you about your life and about the nature of feelings and emotions? There's still something to learn, and that way it's still part of the practice. You're still learning something. And so it's not just for the external things, but it's also for our own mind, our own responses. And so I think I'll finish with this last one, and then we can go to any questions. And this quote here echoes Shantideva's. So he says, if adversity can be corrected, then there is no need to be despondent. And if it cannot be remedied, then there is no benefit even if one becomes unhappy. And so famous quote from Shantideva there, that if you have some problem, some adversity, and it has a solution, then there is no point in becoming upset. And if you have a problem and it has no solution, there's also no reason in becoming upset. And so these are one of these aphorisms from Lojong. If we think, I don't know, take an example, let's say your car is broken down, you really need to get somewhere, and you're gripping that steering wheel and you're slamming down, trying to make it work. You're late and you're stressing out and the car is not moving and nothing's happening. And then we ask ourselves, can I fix this? Is there a solution to this right now? Can I change this? And if there is some way you can change this, if you can call ahead, if you can make alternative arrangements, wonderful, get on with that. Because why is this happening? This isn't fair. Why me? Why did they? All of that isn't actually doing anything to solve anything. It's just upsetting yourself, right? It's compounding the suffering you're already experiencing. And so pragmatic, okay, let's get on with the solution. And if there is no solution, you have no phone service. The car is definitely not working. There's nothing you can do at all. Then again, the worry, the upset, the hurt, the pain, what's that actually going to do? Sometimes I think maybe it's a behavior left over from childhood. That, at least for me, if I got upset enough as a kid, mum would do something to fix it. If you scream and shout enough, if you're upset enough, mum will say, it's all okay, and she'll find a solution for you. And there's almost this sense that if I just get upset enough about this, the universe, God, someone is going to give me a break here. Somebody's going to just magically make this car work. If I hit it one more time, it will start working. But it's never really been the case that suddenly, the universe says, okay, fine, you've had a bad enough day. You can have this one. So the hurt, the worry, it's just compounding an already difficult situation. So why worry? And so this is one of these phrases we can take with us. And so we can come to any questions now, but just to sort of say that if, this has resonated with us, this idea of Lojong, what are the next steps? Where do we go from here if we're interested in this? And really it is to work on that grounding that we talked about, right? Identify and see the sources of suffering and the sources of well-being, to identify, our triggers, what aversions get triggered by those triggers, and learn the antidotes, learn those opposing minds, the things that can really help. So for you, when you get irritated, what is a very helpful antidote? When you get upset with somebody, what is a helpful antidote? And then we just start practicing. And we might pick up a copy of the 7-Point Mind Training or a similar text, a Lojong text that is full of these sorts of things, and start small. The thing that I found most helpful with Lojong so far for me is being able to watch my mind as continuously as possible. To watch my mind for the arising, the smallest arising, like on the train, the smallest arising of that aversion, of the elaborations, of the exaggerations. The earlier you catch it, as the Dalai Lama calls it, catching yourself. You catch yourself early. Apply the antidote. If it's already become a full-blown emotion and you're shouting and screaming the place down, it's a little bit too late. Now, we need to employ some practices to work with our emotions, but it's a little bit too late to transform the small sort of inklings of anger into compassion. It's like, if you ever tried somebody who's upset to just calm down. Doesn't work, does it? And when we're angry, have you ever tried to just not be angry? Or when you're stressed, I just don't want to be stressed, try to not be stressed. It's not a good strategy, right? Have you tried just not being stressed about it? It doesn't really help, does it? And so this is where it's applying the opponents. It's applying the opponents that is powerful. So rather than working on how do I not be angry in the situation, focus on how can I be compassionate in this situation. Rather than can I not be stressed, how can I try to relax? And the opponent is, because the moment you've cultivated the opponent, the first one's gone anyway, right? We come back to that idea of the chair in the mind. So, any thoughts, questions, observations? Doesn't have to be questions, could just be things to add. Yeah. I think we're going to try and use this little microphone so Zoom people can hear you.
Thank you so much for your talk. I really appreciate it. It resonates with me. So my question is, where did you find the courage when you were suffering from depression and you wanted to practice Buddhism? Where did you get the courage to do it?
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think for me, my depression was really reaching a head. It was reaching a peak point, and I was really looking for my way out. I didn't want to exist anymore. When I was looking at the world and I was looking at the suffering that was going on in the world, and my overwhelming sense was just, I don't want to be a part of this. This just does not look like this is going to turn out well. And so I was looking for my way out, and in a struggle, I searched online something like, why is life just suffering? Right? Something really depressing. There must be an answer out there somewhere. And so it was my last ditch attempt really at looking for an answer. And why is life just suffering? Don't those words sort of seem familiar? The thing that turned up was the Four Noble Truths. Interestingly, that's what Google threw at me. It's the Four Noble Truths. And here was somebody 2,600 years ago stating the obvious, that this nature of suffering, but then not just stopping there. That yes, there is suffering in life, but then also saying there's something we can do about it. And so I was hooked. There's something I can do about it, really? And then as I started reading more and absorbing more and practicing more, I noticed I was just starting to feel better. And this is something I can follow. Here is an answer to that sort of question that I had about all this suffering. And so the courage and the strength came from just that little experience of trying it. and realizing just how different that was to me fighting and not wanting to be here and everything. So it just gave me an answer.
We have a question from Victoria.
Oh yeah.
Hello, David.
Hello.
So exciting to see you. I mean, unfortunately, I'm in California, not in Crestone, but it's exciting to see you on this side of the pond. Really great. Thank you so much for your talk. I have a million questions and a million observations. So I'm just going to randomly pull one out of the hat, which is, well, actually, just very briefly, I've been focused on grief a lot lately because I've had a lot of suffered a lot of loss, which is also ongoing, and I have been trying to think about how what occurred to me was the idea of no self, which to me was always kind of an intellectual idea before. All of a sudden has become very, very real and palpable, because if I can take myself out of all of these reactions, then I don't have that aversion. If all of a sudden it's just something I'm observing, if I can create that distance. But here's my question, because I'm good at sort of making intellectual observations. I'm not so good at applying them. The problem I'm having is being quick enough with. So in other words, like if I have time, I can, even as Viktor Frankl so famously said, the space between the affliction and the response, that's where you have the agency to decide how you're going to respond. I'm still having trouble with that, because if I have time to count to 10 or to breathe or to meditate or whatever, then I'm fine. But it's, I feel like I need to keep troubleshooting that, to find that enough time so that I can have the right response, because I have it all up here now, but I'm still reactive in the moment if something triggers me. So I'd love your advice about that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. An observation that I think will resonate with a lot of people. And that is, that there's these gut instincts, right? And the movements of the afflictions and emotions are so quick and so rapid. And so for me, I think what has helped so far, and what, when I reflect back at what has enabled the ability to be able to simultaneously engage in the world and watch my mind for the afflictions as they're happening, is familiarity with shamatha practice, with those grounding practices, with really getting familiar with the mind, both the sort of any shamatha practice of like mindfulness of breathing and so on, but particularly taking the mind as a path, particularly the either the shamatha or the vipassana mode of observing your mind and mental events and getting very familiar with all of that. And when, as with Viktor Frankl mentioning this quote of between stimulus and response, there's that space there in which we can pause and choose a different response. I think unless we have deep familiarity with the mind and we've spent time observing it and whatever, that space is very, very minuscule, if not non-existent for a lot of us. And as I reflect back, it was the shamatha practice that enabled me to see that space. And the process between the stimulus and response, between somebody saying something and me getting upset, slows down, not in real time, but in your subjective time, your subjective experience of an emotion. It slows down and you're able to see that emotional process, right? They might be familiar with the psychological changes, the physiological changes, all those subtle changes that start to happen before we actually lash out or respond. You can see those if you have that sort of deep familiarity with observing your mind. And so it was that practice that really, really helped. And so I'd encourage you to maybe focus on that for a bit. Focus on that, observing your mind and mental events, both in the shamatha mode where you just simply observe what's there and you're non-reactive and you're just observing the passings and the movements of the mind. But then the vipassana mode of getting really curious about that whole experience of your thoughts and feelings. How do they arise? What happens? What happens if I really focus on them? What happens if I ignore them and sort of look at them from the corner of my eye, right? Get really curious about that whole experience of your mind. And I think that might help. So that's my sense anyway. Thank you.
We have a question from Marie in the chat.
Yeah.
Which is about what's the best book or way to start this training, kind of stay on track. We have a couple recommendations from other people in the Zoom. Books by Lama Allen. One is Buddhism with Attitude, the other is the 7-point training. Do you have
So yes, both of those two. I don't know, did everybody on Zoom hear that? It was the question that was from the chat there. Yeah, okay, you heard. So different things that will help. So yes, the 7-point mind training is very helpful. Yes, so Lama Allen's got several books on that. One that was just released, a re-release, The Art of Transforming the Mind. There are also teachings that Lama Allen has done on the 7-point mind training. And this text that I've quoted from here, Transforming Felicity and Adversity into the Spiritual Path, Lama Allen has taught several times. I think the most recent was just before his venturing into this long-term retreat for the CCN. So there's a retreat on the CCN's website from this text. Also, the text that really quite helped me, but I think it needs sort of commentary, but it's a favorite of mine, it's the 37 Practices of Bodhisattvas. And so that was the topic of last year's 6-day CCN retreat that I led. But that text particularly was quite helpful for me. And so you've got the smaller ones. The 8 verses of training the mind is a short lojong, and that's considered like the small length. And then you have Shantideva's way of the Bodhisattva, which is the good length version of lojong, and that patience chapter. If you can find some commentary on that chapter on patience, that's particularly very helpful as well. And so 8 verses of training the mind, 7-point mind training, 37 practices of bodhisattvas, Shantideva's way of the bodhisattva, and finding commentaries on those from teachers that you resonate with, I think will be quite helpful. So yeah, that's that.
There's also a question about, is there a specific list of sayings or slogans?
There is. Yeah.
Cards.
Great. So there's one recommendation. So Pema Chodron has cards of mind training. I've often thought there should be like a nice, good list of all the different mind trainings. And so there we are. Pema Chodron has one that we can use.
Excellent. So we have Teresa, I believe, on the Zoom. I'll ask her to unmute.
Yes, Teresa, please go ahead.
Hello, thank you for your teachings. As I was listening to you speaking, what came to mind for me, like all of us in this world and in modernity, we've all suffered. And when you say now, I actually have gratitude for my suffering, because on the other end of suffering came compassion. So I often feel grateful for the suffering that I've had in my life, because it brought a depth of compassion that I never was always there, but never came forth without the suffering. So I just wanted to share that, and I thank you for all the work you do to bring the Dharma to the world.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Teresa. Thank you.
I think that's all the questions in the Zoom so far.
Anything else here? Yeah. Oh, microphone coming.
So recently I was reading about a therapy technique called IFS, or maybe you've heard of it. Okay. Well, it sounded a little bit like the anecdote you had mentioned about compassion being in the chair versus anger. So anyway, the basic theory of this therapeutic approach is that everybody has different parts in them, and they are protector parts, and they can kind of manifest as anger or other more inflicted emotions to protect you, because that was your trauma response or something to that effect. And so I guess I was just wondering, that's obviously a different worldview as Buddhism, but do you see any similarities or any other resonance between that, working with these parts that might have a bad reaction, such as anger, but might eventually change the job if you can listen to the story? It's just a different approach, and it's something that's been on my mind.
Yeah. In what way do you think it resonates?
Well, I think the way that it doesn't resonate is that you have these different parts of you that are not in maybe the way that it does resonate is that this anger is not inherent necessarily. But I think the part that I get hung up on is, oh, there is this objectively this one part of you. It's going to be on this side or this side of the good behavior.
Yeah. No, I think like you. I think that certainly. I mean, this is a very whistle-stop tour introduction to this, so I don't know it very much, but I can certainly see aspects that might resonate and aspects that might not, and and aspects that might be helpful. In terms of seeing that, where does bad behavior come from? There is no inherent objective self that you can say is the one doing that, but it's part of this sort of interconnectedness of these afflictions coming up and everything else. It can certainly be helpful to see it in that way. But yes, but I think your understanding of Buddhism will help you to be able to sort of understand and perhaps use that method, but without reifying the sense of there being this totally, real, and almost like a separate person in there who's the anger person and then the compassionate person and the loving person, and sort of reifying those as real sort of separate entities, if you like. But it could be a helpful way to think of it, I think. Certainly could be helpful. That's my sense. Yeah. Yeah. Could you check that that's on? Is the little green light on?
David, thank you so much for your meditation as well as your talk. And really delightful. Something that really stood out to me is when you mentioned this, very common approach in modern life that we hear, maybe we grow up with often, is fake it till you make it. And you spoke, the brief bits that I caught is that it has a lot of drawbacks and it kind of creates a shaky foundation. But I thought it would be really useful to hear you speak a little bit more about why that is, in contrast to applying Lojong antidote. So if you would do that, it'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So, I mean, I said it as a shaky foundation, from the sense of it being not authentic and not grounded in wisdom. And so, can there be some benefit from faking it till you make it? Yes, I think there can be. But it depends to what extent. If that is the entirety of your Lojong practice, of just, no, I'm going to try and be compassionate, and you're saying the words and they're almost coming through, gritted teeth, then it's in word only, and it may be planting seeds, in terms of, a different approach, but it's not authentic, it's not grounded in wisdom, and there will always be this part of yourself that's holding on and suppressing to how you really feel in that situation. And so you may have this sense that the situation has passed and you said what you thought was the right thing to say, but internally you're left with this, they didn't get what I meant, and they didn't, and you're left with this internal battle. And so that's what I meant by, I think it's those are the ways that it could be unhelpful. So yeah, it's if we can really sort of see and apply our very best wisdom and compassion, and for it to be really authentic, and that's how I think that that Lojong really comes alive. And then you're not left with this sense of, I didn't quite say what I wanted to say, or you're not suppressing onto any emotions that then come out in other ways, right? It's physical pain and other sort of malevolences. And so that's my sense. Yeah. And I think we do have one on Zoom. So Katie, feel free to unmute if you can. Or...
David, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Okay. So grateful to be here with all of you. And I will see how this comes out. So I have cherished these teachings, and specifically Lama La's 2 books and commentaries. And where I've had a beautiful opportunity recently of just getting to watch my own mind do the dance between constriction and self-grasping. And I'm like, your action is about me and I'm hurt. And then being able to expand out and see, actually, your action is about you and your effort to go towards happiness and reduce suffering in your own life, right? And I think really landing in this place more and more in my life where I can see I'm responsible for my own mind and actions, and what I do is a reflection of that. And likewise, what other people say and do is a reflection of their own mind. And in that way, like, there's so much compassion that arises, and I can totally resonate with your experience on the train also. And then where I get to, I think, really deepen my practice is where the rubber meets the road. And for me, that's, oh, and then how do I actually, I can hold this space of compassion, but then if I have to show up and like set a boundary, or and I guess even as I'm processing this, I guess maybe where that still becomes an issue is there's a sense of self-grasping that can come up in that moment. But I'd love to hear your suggestions or experience with how to work in. Yeah, I mean, I think I see it. And again, it's easier for me to do, of course, with those people that I'm not as close with. So I'm guessing, yes, there's more of a degree of self-grasping. So anyway, well, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you, Katie. Yeah, so I mean, exactly what you said, I think, is one point around the extent of grasping. I think the other thing points to and this is just my own sense, our capacity in our practice, when it comes to boundary setting and things like this. And that is, for a high-level bodhisattva, their capacity to be able to deal with adversity and deal with abuse that people send at them is going to be far better than our own. And they won't necessarily need to set boundaries quite like we will, because it genuinely won't arouse anger in them, right? It'll arouse compassion and love, and they'll be able to continue without their mind being disturbed. And so it points to our capacity, and that is, as we're beginning in this practice, we may need to have boundaries all over the place. And this sense of, I'm able to transform these things, but actually this is something that really, that still brings out the worst in me, and then I'm not helpful to them, and it's just not a very good thing, it's not a very good thing in terms of our conflict. And so I need to set some boundary, whether that's a boundary we express out to them, or whether it's one that we have personally in terms of limiting our time and so on. But being open to the fact that as I increase my levels of compassion and patience and understanding, and as I really thrive in this practice, I may get to shift and remove that boundary and actually change that boundary and be able to handle greater levels of challenge from this person. And so I don't know at all if this is answering your question, but my sense is it is around this sort of capacity, and this is where the being authentic is really helpful. That being really authentic and true to ourselves of where is my capacity actually right now in terms of my Lojong practice, of what I can transform and what I'm still struggling with. And so there's what I can transform externally, and then there is that, right, what I work with internally, right? The fact that I still find this difficult, and having love and compassion for ourselves, and therefore setting a boundary because that's an expression of loving kindness and compassion for ourselves. And then being flexible with the fact that those boundaries might change over time. So that's my sense. Don't know if that helps.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It helps. And I think there's also, I think the dance that I come up with is, or come up against, is really maybe both my own capacity and the capacity of others, and have had situations in my life where I'm like, oh, actually, I'm perpetuating suffering, even though I can stay, like, my mind isn't becoming turbulent, and I can stay open and compassionate in this experience with you. It might not actually be skillful, if that makes sense, to stay.
Absolutely.
And so I think boundaries less of a sense of protection and more of a sense of like, okay, I am in this human form, and how do I cultivate healthy habits and like healthy spaces for relationship, both for myself and for others. So that's, I think there's, and maybe that is right, the path in the bodhisattva. And it's like, okay, well, when I identify as a sentient being, there are these pieces, but I think that's where, that's the piece. So capacity feels helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. And so I'm conscious that we've just gone over 11:30 our time. And so there was something that I just wanted to read by way of a sort of a dedication, closing thought. Some words that I wrote in the first days here that I offered to Lamala as an offering of gratitude. And so we can sort of take it any way you like to, take it as a contemplation, dedication, however we like. And so it's called the unbound sky. So rest here in the space of open awareness, unborn, unceasing, free of grasping and elaboration. Hold the view, all phenomena of samsara and nirvana empty, arising from the ground, non-dual displays of pristine awareness. Like the clear sky, unblemished by clouds of thoughts, this awareness manifests all, yet clings to nothing. See the dance of appearances, rainbows in empty air. They arise, they fade, but where have they ever gone? Release now into the natural state. Let thoughts free themselves in the essential nature like a snake uncoils. Rest here, in effortless knowing. The one who seeks and that which is sought both dissolve into this luminous expanse. Let go, let be. Let the vastness of your own mind reveal itself. Unobstructed compassion, empty in essence, luminous in nature, complete perfection. These words manifest as an offering of gratitude to the one who showers a great rain of love on beings, sustaining them with the nectar of the Buddha's teaching, the one of limitless good fortune, the great being known as Lama Alan Wallace. May his life be long. And so, thank you all very much for your time this morning. I hope something's been helpful or insightful. And I hope I'll see you again. Take care.